Hello, thanks for joining me. I'm going to be building a command line app using Node today to generate a really simple static website. So it's basically going to prompt the user on the command line with a series of questions and then just generate the basic scaffolding, an HTML page, and some folders. And optionally include some script tags and CSS tags depending on the user's choices in the starter code. So let's begin. The point of this video, why am I doing this? Mostly to show how you can use NodeJS to create a command line tool using the Inquirer package, show off how you can manage asynchronous code in Node.js and JavaScript in general, working with promises. And depending on time, I may also show how you can use the Axios package to do some simple HTTP requests. Time permitting, I may do that at a second part to this app, and where we extend static site starter to get the latest version of certain libraries and add them to the project. All right, so here's a little brief README explaining what we're building and the requirements. If you're following along, you'll need to have Node.js installed. I'm working with version 12, although I don't think any features I'm using are missing if you have version 10. And then from there, that's pretty much all you're going to need if you want to follow along. So to kick this off, I'm using VS Code. Make sure you have that as well if you're following along. And the first thing I'm going to do is open up my terminal. I have Bash set up as my default terminal. If you don't have that, I have Git Bash for Windows installed. You can get that as well. And then if you want to make it your default shell, you choose this option, and then you should see it displayed in the list if you installed Git Bash for Windows and opted to have it added to your system path. That is for PC. If you're on a Mac, you should already have a suitable terminal that supports all the bash commands I'll be using. All right, so to get started, I'm going to initialize this as a Git repo. Run git init, and then I'm going to go ahead and make a commit with the README. And we'll put a little message here that says add README or add initial README. All right, next up, since this is a Node project, I'm going to want to add a git ignore file. So I'm going to go ahead and touch git ignore. That's going to create a git ignore file for me. And I'm going to want to ignore node modules because don't need those tracked by Git, and that saves a lot of upload and download size when we're pushing and pulling and sharing on the internet. All right, so next up, I'm going to commit my git ignore and put a message there. Add git ignore with node modules. There we go. All right, so next up is with Node, anytime you are going to be working with any dependencies with a Node project, it's usually a good idea to include a package JSON to use npm for package management. And npm comes installed with Node, alongside Node. So if you have Node version 12, you should have npm version 6 installed. You can check by running npm -- version, like so. And you can see I have version 6.13.6 right now. Your version might be a little different depending on what version of Node you installed. Okay, so I'm going to run npm init. And npm init runs you through a series of prompts and generates a package JSON file. For this demo, I'm actually just going to use all the default options from npm init. So I'm going to add the -y argument to this command. And that way I don't have to answer all the questions. It's just going to give me a starter package JSON file, which we can see here. And then it has my information as the author, and then just basic description, which it picked up from my README. That's why it's nice to have a README already set up before you run npm init, because it actually checks your README and includes the description right here in your package JSON. Also takes the name from the name of the folder. So I'm in static site starter, so npm by default made that the name of my package. I'm happy with all of this. So I'm not going to add anything else. We're not going to be doing any testing for this app. All right, so I have my initial package JSON, and I already know I'm going to want to use Inquire, so I'm going to run npm install Inquirer in the command line now, and that's going to download Inquirer, deposit it and all its dependencies in the Node modules folder, and it should also update my package JSON file to add a list of dependencies. And there we can see I have Inquirer version 7 on board now. All right, so I'm going to make another commit here. Just going to commit everything, and then git commit add package JSON with Inquirer dependency. Go. All right. So let's begin. First off, I think I kind of like to work backwards from the end for a small little app like this. So what I think I want to do is first figure out what it is I want my node code to generate by just making it by hand. So the first thing I want to do is create a new folder, and we'll call this my site. So I want it to create a folder called my site, and then in that folder it should have an index.html, and then in that folder we should have a style sheets folder. And actually I'm going to use the command line to make these, so I'm going to cd into my site now. And we're going to make two more directories called, one called scripts and the other called images. So that creates our initial HTML. And then finally, let's go ahead and create a basic web page. And the title of that should be my site. And then we'll put an h1 tag in there that says welcome to my site. And I think that's basically it. I think to get started, that's all we want to do is prompt the user for the name of the site, and then generate the HTML and the folders as described. And I think that would be a good first iteration. Once we get that going, then we can come back in and I'll edit it to give the user the option to include links to Twitter Bootstrap 4, links to jQuery, maybe a couple other frequently used libraries, maybe like a reset.css if they're not using Bootstrap, or something along those lines might be nice. But I like to start really small and get an end-to-end working version of my app and then iterate from there. So the next step is I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder. We're going to call this index.js. So we're going to write our code. And let's just write some pseudocode now. So first import dependencies or deps. After importing our dependencies, I'm going to create or prompt user for input, or actually specifically for we want to prompt the user for name of the site. And then we need to create folders, my site. I'm going to go ahead and make this a list. Create the following folders. And actually, let's use a block comment for this one. I'll use block comment. And indent that a bit. So we're going to want to create my site, or we'll say site name. And this should be all lowercase. Use dashes for spaces. All right, and then inside that folder, so I'm just going to tab in, we're going to put, we need to create images, scripts, style sheets, and then after we create folders, we need to create HTML string, save HTML string in index in site name dot or slash index dot HTML, and then print message to let user know everything is done, including path to site folder. All right. I think that's a good overall approach. So I'm going to start off with the end and work backwards, I think is the plan here. So first up, start with the message. So console.log created, and I'll just use my site, or for placeholders for now, I'll use all caps actually. So site name, created site name, colon, and then path to site folder, like so. And there's our success message. If I run the code by running node, or let's go back up. So now just test to make sure that works. Cool. Created site name, path to site folder. Awesome. So working backwards from there, the next step is to create an index.html file before I do that. So we're going to bring in the file system module so we can write files. So I'm going to go ahead and require fs. And then I would like to, instead of using callbacks, I'd like to show off how you can work with promises and the async await syntax. So what I'm going to do is also bring in a handy utility that comes with Node called promisify, because I can use this utility to convert fs.writeFile into, so normally when you use fs.writeFile, you need to provide the path for the file, you need to provide some data like a string to put in the file, and then you provide a callback that runs once the file has been created. So our callback, oops, oh, VS Code, help me out here. So the callback receives an error if something goes wrong. But instead of using a callback, I want to be able to use a promise. So I'm going to say const write file equals util.promisify fs.writefile. And that's going to return a write file function that uses a promise interface instead of requiring me to pass in a callback. And that's going to allow me to use async await, which uses promises. So now that I have a promisified write file, let's go ahead and do that. So in order to use async await, I'm going to want to write my code in a function. I'm just going to go ahead and call this async main, async function main, like so. And that way I can use the async await syntax. And then of course I need to call main, so I'm just going to call it right above there. All right, so let's go ahead and clean up the comments a little bit. I have print message to let user know everything is done, including path to site folder. Yep, check. Next up, I want to save HTML string. In fact, I'm going to move all this quote pseudo. I'm going to call it pseudocode. It's not quite pseudocode. All right. All right, let's just double check, make sure nothing broke. I'm going to run this again. Great. Created site name and path to site folder. Excellent. Okay, so now that we have our asynchronous write file and our call to main, and our main has the async keyword in front of it, I am ready to start using async await. So now I can just wait for write file. Now because something can go wrong when I'm writing to file, I'm going to place my call to write file in a try catch block in case there's an error. So I can call await write file, and that way I can console log my success after I know that I've successfully written it to file. If write file encounters a problem, that's going to reject and basically throw an error, meaning that my next line 24 never runs, so I don't misinform the user, and instead I can handle the error. For now, I'll just console.log the error. Eventually, we'll probably do something a little more useful for a user and not just console log the stack trace, which is effectively what this will do. Okay, so back to write file. Write file needs to take in the name of the file. So for now, I'm just going to call it index.html since I haven't created the folder it needs to be placed in. And then inside of write file, I'm going to go ahead and place basic HTML string here. So let's just go grab my placeholder, all that. And I think what I'm going to do, because if I put it right here, it's going to be big and in the way. So what I'm going to do is put a function down here. Function. I'm going to call it render HTML. Like so. And that just kind of helps me put it down at the bottom and get it out of the way so it's easier to see the flow of my app up here in main. If I put a big old template string or a bunch of strings up here, it might be kind of hard to see. So I'm going to do it down here and just return. And I'm going to start off by using a template string or template literal, which in JavaScript that is created using the backtick. So if you look at your keyboard, it's on a standard QWERTY keyboard. The backtick is located to the left of your 1 key. And now I'm just going to paste it in. So there's my initial HTML. Something to note about template strings is that all the white space inside a template string, pardon me, my headset just powered off there. The thing to note about a template string is that all the white space gets preserved. So my output HTML is going to have all this white space off to the side. Which, since I'm trying to generate starter code that a developer is going to go into and work with, I want to make sure it's formatted the way a developer would expect. So normally I would prefer to keep my code indented here since it's in a function, but I'm not going to do that with this function for now because of that fact that template literals retain all the white space. All right, great. So I have my render HTML function. Right now, there's not a whole lot going on. Eventually, we're going to want to plug in. In fact, let's do my placeholder syntax right here. I'm going to do site name and site name. Actually, site name is going to be the name of the folder. So let's use a different placeholder. I'm going to call this site title. Site title. There we go. And I'm just using all caps to help it stand out for me. All right, so now here I can call render HTML. And I should get the HTML passed in. Let's just see if this works. So if I do an ls in my command line, we can see there is no index.html. I mean, I have the my site folder that I created as my little example, but we should see index.html pop up here. So let's go ahead and try running node index. And now we can see it created index.html here with all the placeholders, which is pretty awesome. So next step, I think before I make my commit, I want to be able to provide render HTML with a site title. So I'm going to pass an object since I'm going to eventually want to add a number of options to render HTML. So I'm going to first provide a title, and I'm just going to say my site will be the title for now. And then if I go down here, I'm going to use some So we're passing here at render HTML, we're passing an object that's only one argument, right? So this is going to take one parameter. We can call it data or template data, whatever we want to do it. Or kind of what I think will be nice here is use something called object destructuring. It's part of some newer JavaScript syntax. And what that allows me to do is basically take the keys from an object and turn them into variables. So I can say title inside these curly braces, and that creates essentially a parameter of title that refers to just the value of the title property in this object instead of referencing the whole thing, the whole object I'm passing in. All right, and now I need to take this title and plug it in. So we're going to go ahead and use the syntax for interpolation of a value in a string, which I know that's a huge amount of jargon. It's just a fancy term for basically kind of like a Mad Lib filling in the blank. So the syntax for that, when you use a template literal, the whole reason for doing this, aside from preserving white space, is the ability to basically insert values or the result of an expression in the string. So here I can insert my title variable in between a $sign followed by a pair of curly braces. And you can put any JavaScript expression in between the curly braces, and whatever that expression evaluates to gets converted to a string and concatenated in the middle of the whole string. So I'm going to go insert the site title in both places right now. There we go. Let's go ahead and see if our code's working. Oops. That's right. I have my old index.html. I'm just going to delete that for now. And let's go ahead and run index.js. And now we should be able to see, yep, there's our site. And notice that now instead of the placeholder I had before, it shows my site there. And one other thing before we commit, I might as well fill in these placeholders. So right now the path is index.html. So I'm just going to say const output or HTML path. Actually, this is supposed to print the entire folder, so I'm just going to leave that placeholder for now. I take it back. However, site name we could do. So we could. No, I'm going to leave both as placeholders. I think this is a good stopping point for a commit. And then you can. Actually, I'm going to keep going. I was thinking I would stop at 20 minutes. We're going to go for like another 10 more minutes, and then if you want to join me tomorrow, I will probably finish up tomorrow. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and now that we've tested all this out, clean up some comments here. I'm going to leave this comment since it's not quite done yet as we work backwards. And I don't need the comment for creating an HTML string. So I think in our next commit, for the next commit, I'm going to be creating the folders for our site and then making sure that index.html gets created in the site name folder. So let's go ahead and do that. First, let's make a commit. So git status, see where I'm at. I don't want to commit my site. That's just my example. So I'm going to leave that alone. What I do want to commit is index.js. Git add index.js. Thank you. Yep. And now we'll make a commit. And I'm going to say generates basic HTML file. And add code to generate basic HTML file. There we go. All right, so next up, what's next? We need to create a site name folder and then 3 folders in that. So I think we're going to use the make directory or make dir command. So if we go to the node docs and take a look at that. So NodeJS documentation. Now I'm using version 12, so I'm going to look at the version 12 docs, and then we're going to go to file system, and need to look for, let's see, looking for it. Make directory, where are you? There it is, make dir. You know, technically we could use synchronous commands and be fine, but I kind of want to make this demo about showing how to use promises and the promisify utility. So we're going to use the asynchronous version of make dir. So make dir asynchronously creates a directory, and then our callback just receives an error if something goes awry. Perfect. So once again, I'm going to do my own make dir so I can promisify the node one we did before, and it works. I can use the promisify utility on any function where that function's last parameter is a callback, and when that callback is called, the first argument to the callback should be an error if the operation failed. As long as those requirements are met, you can pass it to this promisify utility and get your promise version of the function. So I'm going to do make dir equals util.promisify, and then I'm going to do fs.makedir. And now, because it returns a promise, my makedir function returns a promise, I can use the await syntax for that one as well. So next we want to await, and then we're going to await makedir, and we're going to pass it my site. So I think at this point I'm going to make a variable. I'm going to call it const site name. I'm going to call that my site. And for now, I'm going to go ahead and make another variable called const site title. Be my site. And I'm going to plug in the site title here. And make dir is going to be site name. Alrighty. So let's see what happens here. I have a feeling we're going to get an error since I already have a folder named my site. Let's try it out. Node index.js. Yep, there we go. File already exists. Yeah, I'm not going to focus on error handling in this demonstration. Typically, I'd probably do some kind of if-else statement down here to provide a user-friendly error, because this would be a good one to prompt a user. It's a very likely scenario for the user to try and generate a site with the same name after they've already generated it. So that would be an error you'd want to typically handle, but I'm not going to deal with that now for this demonstration. Instead, we're just going to rm -r my sites in the command line and try running our code again, and there we go. We should see my site folder. All right, so there's nothing in it, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it again. I'm also going to delete index.html. So now, instead of creating index.html in the same folder as where the node command is running from, what I want to do is use another built-in module called path. So Node has a built-in module called path, and it's all about working with file paths on the system, because on Windows systems, typically your file separator is a /. Mac, Linux, Unix systems, it's a /. Also on Windows, your drives start with a :. On most Unix and Mac, it's just /f, root, and then the drive letter, etc. And using this path kind of helps to normalize all that. So I'm going to use the path to create my HTML path here. So I'm going to say path.join, and I'm going to put site title followed by site name. And that should create the HTML inside our site folder. So let's go ahead and run our node index.html again. Uh-oh. So let's see, we had a little problem. No such file or directory. What did I do here? I used site title instead of site name. It should be site name. That was silly of me. And then index.html. Go ahead and remove my site again. All right, let's try it. There we go, and we should see, yep, there's our HTML file inside our folder, which is fantastic. So we need to make a few more folders now. So after we make the site name folder, and then we want to make dir, and we're going to put path.join site name followed by asset, or not assets, excuse me, images. And then we want to do scripts and style sheets. If we try all that, uh-oh, file already exists. Gotta make sure I delete my site again. And now let's try it. And there we go. All right, so instead of doing these in a row like this, where I wait for one and then the other and then the other, let's go ahead and do this a little differently. And also this code is very repetitive, right? I've got 3 calls that are basically the same. All that's different each time is script, style sheets, etc. So what I think I'm going to do here is we're going to use a feature called promise.all. It's a built-in function, works in both Node and the browser. And what promise.all does is it takes an array of promises and returns a promise for when all of them are done. One thing to be aware of with promise.all is as soon as any promise fails, it rejects for all the promises, which can be frustrating depending on what your goals are and how you're trying to use it. For me, I think it's going to be perfectly suitable. So what I'm going to do here is await promise.all, and then I'm going to put all my calls to make dir, which returns a promise in there. So we're going to move these into promise.all. I'm going to replace the semicolons with commas because it's in an array now, and then I'm going to get rid of the awaits in front of each promise in the array. So now I've just created an array of promises, and promise.all should wait for all of those to complete. Yeah, I want to make sure I make the site name folder first, and then I can create the others. So let's run that code. And of course, I forgot to delete my site. Let's try this again. And there we go. We've got all our folders, index.html. We're doing great. All right, and this is still repetitive, so I'm going to dry this code up just one more step. What I'm going to do here is take an array with the file names I want to create. So images, scripts, style sheets. And then we're going to map over those to return our promises. So we're going to map, take a folder, and return our promise. I'm going to paste that there, and instead of images, we can just put folder, like so. So now I can delete this promise.all, format our code, and now we have little generator here to create all our inner directories that go inside of our project folder. So let's try this again. Code runs, there's my site, and there they all are. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think I'm going to take it one step further though. I'm going to give this array a name and define it up above. So I'm going to call this const site folders. And now I can go down here and say site folders. And that just makes the code a little easier to read. So now we can kind of break this up into phases. I have creating our variables that we're going to use, building up, creating our directories, creating our HTML file, and then finally logging a success message. So at this point, I have a path to the site folder now, don't I? I should probably make that separately so I can reuse that value when I make this directory for site name. I basically have it right here. So I'm going to switch this over to a template literal instead of a regular string, and then put site name here and path to site folder. The way the code's written right now, it's a little tricky. So what I want to do is right now, this site just depends on where we're running our Node app from. So what I want to do is make that explicit. So I'm going to use a function from the built-in process object. When I call path.join on site name here, I'm going to create const site path, and I'm going to use path.join, and what we're going to use is process.cwd. So that returns the current working directory. So what process.cwd does is it returns the current working directory when the node command was executed. And we can use that here, so that way if the user wants to install this npm package as a global command, that user can run it from anywhere on their system to quickly build their static website. So I'm going to use process.cwd right here, and then I'm going to follow that up with site name to create a site path variable. And that means that down here, instead of site name in my path.join, I want to use site path instead. So, and then I can go fill in my path to site folder right here. And now it's going to provide an absolute path anywhere on the system to the location for our generated static website. Let me try running that. Of course, I forgot to delete my site. Let's try this again. Okay, great. Created my site. And now it's logging the entire path to where the file was generated, right? I can even control click on this, and that's going to open up a new VS Code window. And now if I were a web developer, for my front-end website, I'm stoked because I just saved myself the trouble. Not a whole lot of trouble yet, but we're gonna get there. But I saved myself the trouble of creating all those folders that I do every time I start a new site for somebody. All right, let's do a little cleanup, and I think it's time for another commit at this point as we work backwards to create our site. This looks pretty darn good. So I'm going to go ahead and delete my site, and then git add-a, git commit. All right. Creates folders for site. Go. All right. Continuing on, let's see, we already took care of create the following folders, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. I think one more thing to fix here actually is right now, there's no need to have this typed in twice. I can take any site title here and do something like site title dot split. No, not split. And then what we want to split on is any white space characters, whether it's spaces, whatever the user types in. So what I'm going to use is a \s, and that matches all one single white space character of any type using a regular expression. And then the G means don't just split on the first one, but split on all of them. And then I want that to be one or more. So that way, if the user puts like 3 or 4 spaces in, it's gonna get rid of them all. And so we're gonna go ahead and split. And actually, instead of split, I can just do replace. Because what I want to do is replace all white space with a single dash. So each instance of a space becomes a dash, and then I want that to be all lowercase. So I'm going to say 2 lowercase like so. And now that generates my site. So let's just do a little experiment. My super site. And let's see how that turns out. But we're going to run that. And now it's called my-super-site, and it should have the right title, my super site. Perfect. So I'm going to make a quick commit for that one. Git add. Let's go ahead and rm-r my super site to get rid of it, and then git add -A to add our changes in index.html. Dynamically set site path. No, site name from site title. Okay. So next up, working backwards, I think it's time to prompt the user for the site title. So we're going to use Inquirer for that one. And I've already installed Inquirer in the dependencies. If we look at package.json here, there's Inquirer version 7. So in order to use it, I'm going to first import it. And Inquirer is a third-party package. You can find it on npm. If you're curious about the documentation or how to use it, but basically Inquirer uses a promise interface. We can see the .then and .catch. And it uses a promise interface to prompt our user one or more questions. And then once the user's done answering, we get an object back with our user's input, which is perfect for our purposes today. So once again, it returns a promise, so we're going to await it. Await inquirer.prompt. And right now I only have one question, but there's going to be more, so I'm going to use an array. I'm going to pass an array to inquirer.prompt. And then I want to get a reference to the answer. So I'm going to say const answers equals await.inquirer.prompt. And then for site title, I think just a basic question type of, I think it's, oh wait, VS Code was helping us out. Yeah, there we go. Just a basic input is all we need. And then I usually like, when I'm working with Inquirer, I like to put the name at the top because that's how you're going to get the user's answer to this question from the object is based on the name. So it's typically the thing you end up wanting to look for the most often when you're working on your code. So I like to put it at the top. So we're going to give it a name of, let's see, what am I calling it? Site title. And a message of enter the title for your site. Enter a title for your site. Sometimes it's nice to have like a little description, so we'll say EG site, just to give the user an example of what they should be entering. And then I'm just going to see how our answers object is shaping up. So I'm going to console.log answers. And then just for a quick test here, I'm going to call process.exit. That's just going to end the node program before continuing onto this code that we know works. Let's go ahead and run this. Node index. And there's my prompt. Enter a title for your site. And I'm going to say, this site rocks will be the title of it. And then there we can see that our answers object has site title, which came from the name provided to the question. And so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use a little more object destructuring here. So rather than declare site title down here, we're going to get it by destructuring site title up here. So I'm going to try and log site title, and I need to remove this line now since I'm going to be getting it from user input. Enter title. I'm just going to use my site this time. And now it logs my site. Perfect. Okay, so get rid of the test code. And we'll do a quick end-to-end test on things now by running it. Node index.js. And for this site, we're going to call it Hello World because that's super original. Cool. Now, there's a big deficiency in our code right now. What if the user does things like enters a comma or other invalid characters for a file name? Right now, it's just going to try and do that. And so typically, if you wanted to take this further for my demo, I would definitely strongly encourage validating site title. I don't want to take the time to do that because this stream has been running long enough. We're already at about 45 minutes. So I don't want to keep going from there. I think I'll leave that up to you. Have a little fun with it. Just to see what would happen, I'm going to try running it again. And this time I'll put hello, comma, world with an exclamation point. And let's see what happens. Well, it went ahead and made it anyway. So maybe like a remove punctuation is what I should do. So maybe we'll put another dot replace. And we'll look for JavaScript, remove special characters. There we go. That's what I was looking for. So we just want to call dot replace to remove special characters. And I don't want to remove white space though. And I want to put that before I add dashes because this is going to remove dashes. So this takes anything. Oh no, wait, it doesn't remove white space. This regular expression takes anything that's not a letter or a white space and removes it. I have to double check. You know what? I like this one better. I'm going to use this regular expression better. This one's nice and compact, but I don't want to have to go check the documentation for exactly what the /w is going to allow and what it's not going to allow. So I'm going to use this instead. And now I can replace everything. It's going to remove all special characters. I don't want to remove the dash or the underscore though. So we're going to leave dash and underscore intact. I think those are common characters folks might want to use. Also, we're going to take the dot out. Sorry, users, if you want the dot, we're not going to allow it. And that's going to remove all punctuation. So now, problem solved. I know I said I wasn't going to do it, and there I went. And then I just formatted my code if you're wondering what the heck happened there. The shortcut for that in VS Code is Alt-Shift-F, and use whatever code formatter you have to automatically format your code. Okay, so now we get our site name. We strip out all the special characters we don't want. replace those with an empty string, and then we swap out all the white space characters with dashes, and then convert everything to lowercase. Beautiful. Okay. And the I here is for ignore case, if you're wondering. The global says every occurrence of these characters, and then I says ignore case. Not really sure if we need to ignore case. No, we don't. Let's get rid of the I. All right. All right, let's test it one more time for the changes. I'm going to go ahead and rm-r and remove both our hello directories there. And let's run it again. Hello world. And now if we look, nice, all the special characters were removed. I'm very pleased with that. So let's go ahead and remove our hello world directory. All right, awesome. Basically, our first iteration is done now. We prompt our user for a site title and quickly generate a couple of the HTML and the folders we want. So I'm going to go ahead and make another commit. Prompt user for site title is what we did on this commit. Alrighty, so we're getting a lot closer now. I think the next step is we want to add some options now. We want to give our user the option to include jQuery, I think, and then, yeah, let's do that next. So I'm going to add a Boolean. We're going to take in a Boolean that says use jQuery, and that's going to be true or false. And I'm going to add a script tag for jQuery down in the body. So let's go grab the script tag for the jQuery CDN. We're going to use CDN.js jQuery. And go get the script tag for version 3.5. You might be wondering, well, the problem with doing that is that what happens when you're using this command line app in 3 years and maybe there's a different version of jQuery? Yeah, so maybe in a future video, I will show how we can use CDN.js's API to get the latest version each time. But for now, just to get a little more functionality packed in, we're just gonna stick with using jQuery this way. And actually, I'm gonna go ahead and run my app here to create my site. Just so that way I can get my code formatted using my code formatter for HTML, which is prettier. And that way I can update my template string more easily. Go. And I'm going to paste that in. Now the problem is I don't always want the script tag. I should only include it when use jQuery is true. So we're going to go ahead and store the script tag for jQuery in a variable. I'm going to say const jQuery script equals. I'm going to paste that in. Perfect. And now I'm going to go down here. And actually, you know what? I don't want this to be a multi-line string. We're just going to let it run on forever, which means I don't need a template string. Instead, we'll use single quotes since the script tag uses double quotes inside. And I will put it all in one line. Just double check the line here. Yep, everything looks good. Great. And now I can add my conditional. So I'm going to add another $sign and a pair of curly braces, and then we're going to say use jQuery. And then we're going to use an and short circuit operator here to put in jQuery script, like so. And actually, I don't want to do that. I'm going to use a ternary. So ternary is like a little mini if-else expression. The first is the condition. The second value is what it resolves to or evaluates to if the condition is true. And then you follow that up with a colon, and then the value if false. So we're going to take use jQuery. If that's true, then we add the jQuery script. Otherwise, we just leave this completely empty. And that's going to work great. Now I need to remember to pass in use jQuery when I call render HTML. So we need to pass in use jQuery here. And then I need to prompt my user to find out if they would like to use jQuery. So we're going to add another question. We're going to say name, use jQuery. Need to remember to destructure that, use jQuery from our answer. And the type of this one is going to be a confirm, which returns a Boolean with Inquirer. And the message is include jQuery 3.5 from CDN.js. All right, so we're going to ask our user if they want to include jQuery 3.5 from CDN.js. And if they say true, then we should see a jQuery in there. If the answer is false, then it should not include it. So let's try that out. I'm going to just run a test here, and I'm going to say no jQuery for the first test. No jQuery. And I'm going to say no to the answer. And then we're going to check and see if no jQuery should not have the jQuery script. Great, it doesn't. Now we're going to try it again, but this time say yes to jQuery. So I'm going to call this one with jQuery. And I'm going to say yes. And now if we go look at with jQuery, there's the script tag. All right, so time's kind of running low. It's almost been an hour now. I don't really want to keep going, but the next steps for this app would be add another conditional for include bootstrap 4, and then we would want to add conditional logic to check for, add another property here, use bootstrap 4 property. If it's yes, then we include bootstrap CSS along with the bootstrap JavaScript tags at the bottom. If the user selected both use jQuery and use bootstrap, then we would want to make sure that we didn't include the slim version of jQuery, which is typically what you would use if you're just using bootstrap and didn't want the full jQuery minified version, which is what jQuery alone is getting us. So I might add that. If I do, I might do another stream where we continue working on this app, but I'm going to go ahead and stop here for now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you got something out of this and maybe got a little more comfortable or cleared up some questions you might have had about the async await syntax. So I guess one last step to take on this app is to go ahead and commit our second prompt. So I'm going to git add -a and then git commit prompt user to include jQuery. And there we go.